Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here again to another video. Sad news to report on the tragic loss of former professional wrestler, WWE superstar, member of the Legion of Doom, former Denver Bronco, Darren Drozdov. Darren Puke Drozdov. Now, obviously, Drozdov was an NFL football player before becoming a part of the WWE, but I remember him most from his time in the WWE. Um, he first became famous as a football player for puking during Monday Night Football in the early 90s. And he even achieved a Sports Illustrated uh, cover for that specific talent. And that was what got him the attention of Vince McMahon. As we saw in the 1999 movie Beyond the Mat, Vince McMahon, it was in that movie they show when Vince first meets him and he signs his contract with Vince. And Vince is like, he's gonna puke, he's gonna puke, he's gonna puke. And then he pukes in the um, in the wastebasket. And then he makes his debut like in the middle of '98, and that's just when LOD had formed. LOD 2000. Their actor was getting old, and they were looking for something to spice it back up. Remember, DX cut Hawk's mohawk in late '97, and then they finally emerged with Sonny at the Tag Team Battle Royal in 1998 at WrestleMania 14. But towards the middle of '98, Sonny had been out because of her personal issues, and they brought back Paul Ellering, and they were looking to spice things up again. So they put Roz with them, and he became the third member of LOD. Now, unfortunately, besides his brief cameo with the puke thing, he became and that unique ability, he became more famous slash infamous for suffering a severe career-ending injury in the ring at the hands of D'Lo Brown. They were wrestling each other in October of 1999 at the Nassau Coliseum, and D'Lo did a bad botch pile driver. He messed up big time, and Droz was rendered a quadriplegic. And thanks to Under Armour designs, they designed him a special wheelchair. He had very special needs after that, and it was just one of those cautionary tales, like with Owen Hart. It seemed like 1999 was a really bad year for the WWE in terms of accidents happening because the stakes were so high, because it was the Attitude Era, and they wanted to really beat WCW in the ratings and continue this mega um, this mega run that they were on. They put their wrestler, they put this wrestler and all their wrestlers really at risk. Now, according to D'Lo, uh, there was never any animosity between Droz and himself. You know what I mean? Droz didn't hate D'Lo. He didn't despise him. He knew it was an accident. The thing about it was that, remember, all these guys have extensive years of experience, extensive years of training. They're not really, they don't become great professional wrestlers overnight. And even when they do are great professional wrestlers and they have that extensive training and that extensive background, a lot of times it still doesn't go as well as you might expect. You know what I mean? There's still accidents. Look at Edge, for example. Look at Saraya, Page, for another example. Things still happen. But with Droz, I think because he didn't have that experience, he didn't have that level of being in the ring and working all those years, he was more susceptible to that. And plus, D'Lo, I'm not saying that D'Lo deliberately didn't take care of him, but you know, I haven't really watched enough shoot interviews by D'Lo to really know what exactly went wrong. Of course, this was a house show match. It wasn't a televised match, so we didn't actually see it. It wasn't like with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Owen Hart. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Here you got a guy like Owen Hart. He's uh, a second generation wrestler. He's Stu Hart's son, and even he fucked up. You know what I mean? So with D'Lo, it was like I never really watched a lot of shoot interviews with how Droz felt about it. You know what I mean? Did he feel bitter about it, and how D'Lo felt about it, and what were the actual circumstances of the injury? But it was so sad how he was, because I did watch the Vice documentary, The Dark Side of the Ring, one they did on him, and it was so sad how he really was. Because they were talking about, I think it was the Rolf Roll, uh, and he was featured in it, and it was just sad. Another tragedy in professional wrestling. You know what I mean? People think that professional wrestling is all fun and games, and it's all just fake, and it's all, oh, guys get up. You know what I mean? They're, because our education to it, especially in the '80s, when you had like guys like Hulk Hogan doing like Superman comebacks and shit, it was like, okay, none of this is real, so we all got um, desensitized to it. But then when you see things like this, it really breaks your heart, because here was a guy who genuinely wanted to get into the business and wanted to do something a little bit different. I mean, hey, he was already thrusted into a shitty angle to begin with. The whole Hawk alcoholism thing. Remember that, guys, when Hawk WWE took a page out of WCW's book. WCW was doing the alcoholism thing with the breakup of the Outsiders in '98. So WWE thought, okay, let's do that with LOD. And then Hawk starts becoming drunk on TV and even falls off the Titantron. And it was almost like, okay, you're parroting an accident, but an actual accident happened to the person that was put in to replace Hawk storyline wise. Um, Also, one thing I didn't know about Droz that I actually looked up, he was actually instrumental in training Albert A Train, aka Tenzai, in professional wrestling. So he did pass on, what little he knew. But anyway, rest in peace to Droz, and I'm glad that he had that sort of peace and that sort of solace in a sense, because a lot of people, like, look at juxtapose him versus somebody else who tragically had an accident in the ring and ended up without use of their limbs, the Dynamite Kid. Whereas you got the sense from Dynamite, who was less disabled than Droz, that he was very bitter about how things went, how his life panned out. Whereas Droz, when in the interviews that I saw anyway, Droz didn't really come off as bitter. He wasn't like, I don't know how he really felt, inside internally, but he wasn't out there blaming D'Lo, cursing out D'Lo, saying that D'Lo was a piece of shit, saying that D'Lo didn't know how to work or anything of that nature. He seemed pretty positive about it. You know what I mean? But one thing that really struck me was that besides Sunny, I mean, I don't know if you want to count her as a member of the LOD. She was briefly, like I said, she was their manager in the early part of 1998. But um, all the members of the Legion of Doom, at least the WWF version, not the version from Georgia back in the late '70s and early '80s, but the WWE version of Droz, Animal, and Hawk are now no longer with us, and neither is Precious Paul. You know what I mean? So, rest in peace to them all. I was a huge LOD fan, and I even liked Droz. And like I said, who doesn't remember that that scene with him puking in the wastebasket is the most famous scene from that movie, Beyond the Mat, besides maybe Jake Roberts smoking crack in it. But besides Jake smoking the crack. When you think back to that Barry Blaustein movie from 1999, what you remember is he's gonna puke. He's gonna puke. He's gonna puke. And he pukes in the wastebasket. Mm. He's gonna puke. He's gonna puke. Mm. It just a crazy Vince McMahon moment. Anyway, guys, rest in peace to Darren Drozdov. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I would have loved to make this video a lot longer and talk about a huge career retrospective of Droz, but unfortunately, because of his accident and because of how his career was cut short, there isn't much to talk about. Just that he had tremendous tenacity and he survived so much. Let me see. Hold on. Yes, I was correct. Droz was featured in the Brawl for All episode of Dark Side of the Ring. He was in the Brawl for All. you know, of course, the Brawl for All is that big, steal a Yiddish word, the big Mishigas that Vince Russo concocted in late 1998, according to him, to to prove Bradshaw wrong. Bradshaw was saying that he was he was the best shoe fighter, the toughest SOB, the real toughest shoot SOB in the WWF at that time, and he was talking shit in the locker room. So Vince Russo was like, "Hey, put up or shut up," you know, and he devised this weird boxing, wrestling, pre MMA set rules type hybrid combat just to prove Bradshaw wrong. And Bart Gunn ended up winning it. Then they did nothing with Bart, and Bart eventually got knocked out by Butterbean at WrestleMania 15 in Philadelphia. So yeah, Droz was featured in that episode because Droz was a part of that. So it just seems like a lot of stupidity was surrounding the late 90s. We look back on the Attitude Era with rose colored glasses, I think, because that's when we were kids. But now a lot of it is just really fucked up, stuff, man. Like, not only the content, not only to steal a word, degeneracy, not only necessarily even that, but just the risk that the wrestlers were taking. Jim Cornette talks about it. Jim Cornette often says that back in the day, in the territory days or in the 80s, right, they didn't have to do much. And you see that with Hulk Hogan, too. It's like Hulk Hogan, in his era, he didn't do all that much. He never jumped off the top rope. He never jumped off the ceiling like New Jack. He never took pile drivers. He never did nothing risky. He just did his basic, as he calls it, Three Stooges act. Yeah, the leg drop got him into a lot of back pain later on after doing it for years and years. And now he's going on a lot of podcasts and said that he should have maybe retired like 20 years ago after he had his WWE comeback in 2002. But at the same time, he didn't do a lot of risky stuff. Whereas in the Attitude Era, they were going balls to the wall, and this stuff really happened. You know what I mean? This people ending up paralyzed. I mean, 2 years before this happened to Droz, this almost happened to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they still didn't learn. They still continued to do this risky stuff. I mean, anything could have happened. Sure, it's professional wrestling, as the old saying goes. It's not ballet. Anything could have happened, as it did with Droz. You know what I'm saying? We talked about it before in the earlier video with Patty LaBelle. Things happen. It's live TV. But at the same time, when you're doing something that is very this much physical, you have to take precautions. This is the point of professional wrestling. We talked about it in the Samira Mensa stock video. the point of professional wrestling, why professional wrestling became a work the way it became in the early 1920s, was because um, they didn't want the performers to get permanently injured, end up wheelchair bound, or anything. What sticks out to me is what they told Cactus Jack when he first started doing what he started doing when he was just doing in the early 90s, in WCW, the elbow drop. They said you'll be in a real wheelchair before you're 35 years old. Thankfully that didn't happen to Cactus. He's still up and running, even though I made that joke, me being disabled, and he came to my school and it seemed like he was almost as disabled as us. You know what I mean? But anyway, rest in peace to Darren Drozdov. He was one of those minor characters in the Attitude Era that kind of stuck out to you just because he could do that puke thing. Uh, yeah. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love you guys.